So guys, here it is inside. I've got it all off and separated. I didn't cover everything taking it apart because it's fairly straightforward, really, just disassembling it and cleaning it up a bit. But I think the first thing to say is it's, you know, the bearing's shot out the back now, is that how well this actually has survived for not actually really being set up at all. I mean, when I was doing it, had time pressure and money pressure, so I tried to just get away with doing the bare minimum of what I could, which was replace gears which didn't look particularly happy and shove it all back in and hope that it worked fine. And that has, you know, that's worked. I think you could use the gearbox for 1,000 more miles. I'm surprised at the lacquer wear. The dogs look nice in all fairness. To my untrained eyes, those look like fine. And obviously the movement's all massively awful because it's all separated now. It was pretty bad when it was in the Jeep, but you know, they're not chewed up or anything. I was getting grinding from first to second when the gearbox hadn't run, so when it was cold, and then it calmed down a lot, and then third into second I had to double declutch to prevent grinding. So you know, it was grinding this box, but actually the dogs look, I expect to see them really worn down, but it actually looks not atrocious really. First gear, which was a new reproduction gear, looks pretty happy. There's one chip out, so one tooth obviously took a bad, there you go, one tooth took a hit when changing, but I'm pretty careful when I change from first into first, from higher gears, and when I go into first I always come to a complete stop. There's actually a couple of teeth. I always come to a complete stop, or as I slow down, gently put pressure on the shifter and then only let it feed itself in when it wants to. So that's why that survived pretty well, so I'm pleased with that. And this second gear as well was a reproduction one. We'll have to have a look at these and see if I'm going to keep them or not. Although they look good, you know, if I'm putting some expensive components in here, I might as well go the whole hog, but we'll come to that. But yeah, I mean, what it says is how good the T84 is, that even somebody just throwing one together without much thought, if they're lucky, can make it work mostly acceptably, well, pretty acceptably really. So yeah, it says a lot about the T84 really, that it's not complete trash, so that's fantastic. But we'll try and get it apart if I can remember exactly what I'm supposed to do, so bear with me. We've got to get the front off first. I've just loosened these off, they're 1/2 inch, so I've only got the small socket for these. But under here I've got the cork, original Ford cork gasket, which was really nice. So it was a gasket set which was actually usable. We've already looked at the front one here, which is the original Ford gasket. You can see that's absorbed the oil. You can even see the Ford F mark there. But look at that, it's a lovely gasket that was. And that was 70 years old, over 70 years old, and worked perfectly. Like I said in the reproduction parts thing, it doesn't work for all old gaskets. A lot of them shrink and what have you, but these ones were really nice. I got them from America from a guy who had loads of them, selling them for nothing pretty much, and they were really good. So let's get you off front first, the front bearing cover. There's that cork gasket. Look at that. Yeah, it's nice that. So I only used a sealed bearing on one side. So the oil feed comes in down here. Yeah, the oil feed comes in here and it lubes this bearing on the front here. And this is the cork gasket which seals there. I never had any leak out the nose gear, and you can see why. Look at that. That's fantastic. That's a quality cork gasket, that is. Thank you, Ford. You made a good one. It's a shame. I've got one spare actually. It was sort of impregnated with something when I first got it. So yeah, they obviously had reproduction ones. I wonder if they've got the same sort of impregnation. There was some sort of like rubbery, plasticky stuff on it. But you can see the way it's taken up the shape there. So initially it had a little bit of seepage until it moulded itself into this shape. And then it hasn't leaked one bit. So that's a quality bit of gasket work there. Pleased with that. So yeah, and this one as well. Look at that. It's beautiful. Lined up fantastically. That's the original Ford gasket. It's all really hard now. It's absorbed the oil. Very strange, but that's a good gasket that. So yeah, you know, not all gaskets are terrible, but some of them can be, depending on how old they are. So off this comes. Thank you, gasket. Yeah, it did a nice job that. Sort of pliable. Yeah, so we take that off, and there we go. There we've got our front bearing. These were new bearings. Now then, so let's have a think. We've got to drop the cluster gear. We've got to drop the cluster gear to get the top out. And there's my rubbishy. This was already in here. This sort of tab to hold the cluster gear in. So if we drop the cluster gear, we undo these. Now, let's come to the top then. So these need a special Bristol, is it a Bristol tool or something like that? They've got a special spline to them, which I don't have. However, I found these little Torx. It says it's not a Torx bit, it's a 4.0 something bit. So this bit works in them without wrecking them, which is good. Where's that gone? So you don't need the Bristol tool exactly, if you're lucky, if they're already quite loose and they don't take a huge amount of work. So let's loosen these off. So these are the forks, the Selector Forks, just being loosened off there. Yeah, I've already loosened these off. And then we'll drop the cluster gear down and see if that works. So these forks I'm going to be replacing, I think. We'll compare the wear on them to the original. I've got the new NOS ones and see how that goes. So looking out the back now, yeah. Doesn't really matter, does it? You've got to knock this out. We'll try and get this tab out. So, clean my hands a bit. Blue roll. Blue roll and gloves. They're a real necessity for working on Jeeps, in my opinion. So, haven't brought in a hammer with me, but we can adapt and improvise. Yeah. See, there's always some way of adapting and improvising. Obviously, Bubba got this. It worked as a tab. It got squashed at one point between the cases because your transfer case is on the back here. This bit got squashed between them at some point, but that works as a tab. So the cluster gear is now loose, so underneath there. So if I pull that out, the cluster gear is going to drop down, so these gears can all come out. So you've got to remove this rail as well. Let's fire this rail out first. I think it can go out either way. I'll do it out the back. Should have probably brought a hammer with me. There we go. So that's that rail. The rail's pretty tight. I'll check it for straightness. We'll check it for straightness and any wear, but you know, I'm trying to reuse things like this. There shouldn't be any issues with that, but generally other stuff is going to be replaced. They're loose. Okay. So let's then stiff? No, it's just stiff. Ta-da, right, cluster gears drop down. Let's have a look at this shaft. This was a reproduction shaft 1,000 miles ago, which has been in there. And it looks, I think that burring was already on there. It was a bit of corrosion burring. So what can we see? See some wear lines here, but they're nothing, minuscule. Just the surface, but otherwise, look at that. So that's 1,000 miles, the cluster gear, the shaft has suffered no ill effects that I can see whatsoever, apart from just a touch of scoring there, but it isn't really scoring, it's sort of polishing really. So that looks good. We'll check it as well, but that's pretty good. The previous one was cut in and just bowed in ridiculously, so that's done pretty well in my books. That's for 1,000 miles, so that's pretty good. Right, so we've dropped the cluster gear down now. So the cluster gear is no longer engaged with these gears along the top here, so can we start removing things out the back? Probably forks need to come out, don't they? Yeah, so forks. Now the forks have got the poppet balls which go into detents to stop it, to lock it in, and this one could rock back and forwards a bit, so the detent is not great in this one, so there's probably going to be changing these rails. There's also weird wear. It looks very strange. It's sort of chattering. I think it's, yeah, I think it's probably just chattering wear, where it's just chattered on it for thousands of miles. So these are most likely to be removed. Now you can push this one out the front, because there's quite a lot of force on those poppets holding them in, but this one has the cap to stop the oil escaping, so I can't drive that out, but I can probably just, if I give it a whack with the brass, I can do that. So let's totally undo this so it's free, and then we'll push this one out. Yeah, he's very loose now. There we go, there's the special retainer with the end on it there. It doesn't look damaged. Doesn't look, the using that, whatever that socket is, hasn't eaten up the end or damaged or anything like that, so that's good. So that's one. Again, as I've said many times before, it's easy when this it's not all rusted to hell. This one doesn't look quite as good, but it doesn't look terrible. Yeah, I mean, you might know what it's like if this is all rusted to pieces. It's just a nightmare, isn't it? Simple things like doing that are impossible. Let's have a look. So this has collected some metally film under it, but nothing terrible. Slides nicely. Yeah, right. Let's stop playing and drive it out. So we're going to drive this one out, and the balls are going to go flying everywhere if we're not careful. No, you're too big. So that's fine. Let's use the incredible system again. There we go. So now I can just gently push it. The ball's going to go twanging out somewhere. Right, here we go. There she is. So the ball's underneath with the spring. There you go, pinged up. Ball's gone down there. So it's just a spring with a ball on the top, which goes into a detent. And the detent, come on you, stop fighting. You're not interested in doing that? That's not helpful. Let's knock the ball out. There's the ball, so I can push again. So that's the ball. One ball bearing. Now you've decided to get stuck at the last bit. You don't only go one way, do you? No, it's just held on the fork. Yeah, so the ball runs, there we go, those are our detents. I'll have to compare those. They don't look terribly terrible. I have to compare those to how they're supposed to look, and we can work out whether those are usable or not. I mean, I don't see a huge amount of wear. I see the angle, the step cut into them. There's where the ball's ridden. You can see that. Doesn't look terrible. This is with a fork. So it's this portion here which is what I have to decide whether that's okay or not. Again, not looking terrible. So here is first gear selector fork. She wants to come out. She might not come out easily. There we go. First gear selector fork. So I've got one which is forward marked. Is this one forward marked? No. Looks just like the forward one though. So the wear is here where it's been riding. So you can see how that's worn. As it's sat as first gear, as it's sat and selected first gear, how it's pushed and ridden there, so you get extra movement that you shouldn't have. So we'll measure that and compare it to the original, to the new old stock, and see how that compares. But as I've got a replacement, I'll probably be replacing that just as a matter of course to remove any extra slop that we don't want. So and if you've never worked with gear oil before, unfortunately gear oil is absolutely disgusting, and everything will stink of gear oil, and everything you touch will stink of gear oil, and the smell is like you wouldn't believe. If someone said, yeah, gear oil smells really bad, you go, okay, but no, really, gear oil really gear oil really smells terrible. The smell, and you can't get it out of your clothes, it's just god awful. Right then, so the shaft started to ride back a bit now. Yeah, the shaft's come back. So let's remove the... Oh, there's my bearings, sealed bearings. These are SKF sealed bearings, nice. These should be fine, look at the size of them. We'll check those again. We'll make sure we can't see any burrs inside the race. There shouldn't be. I mean, there was no rubbish in the oil when we looked at it. It looked pretty good, didn't it? So shouldn't, you know, no big particles which could have got in here and worn it and put any damage, what's it called, spooling, any spooling in the race. So hopefully those are okay. So the bearings I'm trying to keep good. There's a spacer. There's my late, because this is a late one, it's got the spacer in it. So we have to measure spacers and decide what we're going to do with them. You see there's corrosion on this spacer, but that's not where the seal was running. So I've got my nice SKF seals in there. Again, I don't know whether we're going to be able to save the seals, whether they're worth saving or not. So, right. All the little needle rollers are inside this nose gear here. That's where all the little needles live. So really what we need to do now is get you out of the way. So we're going to have to give it a, without breaking your fingers, or doing that. So the ball bearings rolled under the door. I should have thought about that, forgot about that. See? So the spring came out and so did the ball bearings. But that detent wasn't very good. There was a bit of movement in there, wasn't there? So we're going to have a look at that and decide if that's any good. So these are all completely separated now. Out comes this shaft. There's the detents again. You know, there's nothing terrible looking about these. They're a bit weird here. There's wear here and this weird sort of chattering. I'm not sure about that, but otherwise the shafts look nice. Hopefully that translates to being good, but like we said, looking nice and actually working properly are two different things, aren't they? So you have to measure and make sure that they work correctly. So here's the second, third selector. Again, worn. You can see the wear there. I've got a replacement for that as well, so a new old stock replacement for that, so that's going to be replaced, but not thrown around. But they're not terrible. I don't know what the wear limits on those are. I don't remember seeing, oh, maybe there was a wear limit, so we'll look into that and see if there was a wear limit on those.